Welcome to a discussion about masks. The first thing I want to talk about is a really useful repository for some PixInsight scripts. And if we go here to Resources, Updates, and Manage Repositories, you can add this repository to your PixInsight. It'll bring in all the scripts. And those scripts are described right here. These scripts, and there's a bunch of them, and not all of them have anything to do with masking. Several of them are really useful. In particular, the ones that we're going to be talking about today are Game and Advanced Star Mask. There it is, Advanced Star Mask and Game. And then there's another script which is built into PixInsight called Color Mask that's also quite useful. And then we'll talk about a few different processes as well. But if you don't have that script, then what you do is you come here to the Manage Repositories dialog, click on Add, put that URL in, and it will bring all of those scripts into your PixInsight. And if they're updated, it'll pick up the updates. Let's start off with the most basic mask, the luminance mask. We have an image here. We want a luminance mask for it. Just click the Extract Luminance, and we have something that makes a great mask. We can also, if it's not, say, contrasty enough for our intended use, then take curves and we can make it even more contrasty. Range masks are a very common type of mask, and we can create one by coming here, turning on our preview. So now that we have our preview, everything is currently included in the mask. So we need to start removing things, and we can remove things from the lower end of the intensity scale by dragging right. And you can see the parts of the image that were less nebulous are being dropped. We can remove things from the higher end of the scale by doing this. And you can see we're starting to drop out some stars that way. So this is a great way to produce a mask that gets rid of the highest intensity components and the lowest intensity components and leaves you with stuff in the middle. But it's a little bit difficult to be precise because it's hard to relate what you're seeing in this preview to your image, or at least for me. But it's definitely a useful mask. Now when we come down to the fuzziness parameter, basically you can see that kind of eats away at the edges of our mask and makes it a little bit less hard-edged there. By contrast, smoothness just kind of burrs off those rough edges of the mask. It really just blurs them, but it doesn't shrink them the way that fuzziness does. See how fuzziness eats away at our mask. So typically, I will end up fuzzing things or smoothing things out some, and depending on what I'm doing, adding a touch of fuzz to it. And normally what I want is a lightness mask, but we'll look at the two different kinds of masks you can produce here. So here's the lightness mask, and you can see screening does things like that, and I'm not really sure why you'd want to do that, so I won't even try. But there's our mask, and if we apply that and show, you can see it does a pretty good job. Just like we did with the luminance mask, we can use curves or histogram transformation to make this more contrasty if we need to. The color mask script is actually a great alternative to producing a range mask, and it's a lot easier to use. Come up to Script, Utilities, and choose Color Mask, and make sure that the target image is the one you want. And you can use these sliders to control the start and end range for your hue, but more often than not, you're going to end up using one of these convenient selector buttons. And in this case, we want to grab the reds. Now, the one thing that in this case, I want to produce a mask that has the red nebulosity, but doesn't include things like red stars. And to do that, I'm going to do the layers to remove and set that to 4. And that's going to remove the first 4 wavelet layers. And that's going to get rid of the smallest objects that might be caught up in the mask, like the stars. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Everything else you can leave at defaults typically. And there we have a mask that selects just the reds. That was easier than producing the range mask we did earlier. Now we might want to bring the levels up here to make that mask a little more contrasty. But other than that, that's pretty much it. It's a great, simple way to produce a mask. I think it's one of the unsung heroes of PixInsight because you never hear people talking about it. Now we're going to talk about the game script. This is a script that comes from that repository mentioned earlier, and it is a fantastic way to select circular and elliptical objects. So you come here and select Game, and you can zoom in to where you want, or you could just click Add, but it'll put the object in the middle of your screen. So we can zoom in here, and it gives us an ellipse. And that ellipse can be moved around. We can adjust it, and very easily construct a mask. Now, it's going to give us a choice of several different kinds of masks, and for many of them, you're going to want to make your ellipsoid a little bit larger than the object you want to select, and that's because the mask is going to have a gradient at the edge, and so if you select it too tightly, then the effect that you want to apply through the mask may not hit the edges of your object as strongly as you like. So for cases where you're going to use one of those gradient style masks, select a little bit more than you intend. The cool thing about this though is you can do more than one. Let's say, for the sake of discussion, that this was another galaxy and we wanted to select it. We could come up here and select our little star in this case, but galaxy. So let's just create all of the masks types that it can and take a quick look. So you can see that script was very busy. Here's the first kind of mask that it creates, which is a gradient mask. And a gradient mask is just fully on at the very center of the ellipse, and it slowly fades out to the edge. So definitely a useful mask for trying to blend the effect that you're trying to create through the mask into the background. And you can see we have 2 because we selected 2 ellipses there. Next is a luminance mask, but really it's kind of an inverse luminance mask. We get all of the places where the luminance signal was high as black in this mask so that things won't affect it. So this might be a great mask to do noise reduction through. Our next mask is a gradient edge mask, and really, let's bring this one up first. This is the binary mask. And so in the binary mask, we start out with completely on in the ellipse and completely off outside the ellipse. This is probably not a terribly useful mask on its own, but it might be useful in use with convolution or with pixel math to be able to do things. But on its own, it's going to leave very harsh transitions to the background. The gradient edge mask takes the binary mask and gives you a softer edge. I think in many cases that might still be a little too harsh of a transition, but it is there if you need it. This mask is called a brightness mask, and this is really what we would think of as a luminance mask. And it just selects all the luminance components from the things that are inside the object. And finally, we get what they call a star mask, and this is really a starless mask. It's the gradient mask with all the stars that are inside that ellipse subtracted out. So you can see in the top case, it's a great way to select a star halo. In this case, we have the galaxy without any of the foreground stars. And so we could apply things like local histogram equalization to this one. That is the game script, but it's not just for galaxies. If we apply it here, we can use it anywhere where you have a vaguely elliptical object. And if we produce, say, a star mask from that, we get that. That makes a really useful mask. And you can see what I mean here about the effect of the mask needing to be a little bit larger than what you expect. So that works out pretty well. And that is the game script. Star masks are something we need to create all over the place in PixInsight, and this script is an amazingly easy way to produce a star mask. And that's all there is to it. We have a star mask. Now there are some caveats with this star mask. Let's apply it and see what we got. If we zoom in here, we can see that, see those couple of big stars there? We did not get the big stars. And we didn't really get the smallest stars. We kind of got the medium stars here. Now that might be okay for a lot of cases. If it is, then Advanced Star Mask is a great way to quickly, without any fiddling around with the star mask process, to get a simple, basic star mask. If the Advanced Star Mask script doesn't produce a star mask that's useful for your needs, then the next step is to come to the star mask process. If we run this on default on an image that's full of stars like this, we're not going to get something that looks terribly useful. We do get a star mask, and you can do things with it, but it's probably not the kind of star mask that you want. One of the things that I've found useful is to go in and look at your image, look at the background level, and it looks like our background is under 0.2. So if we use 0.2 as our noise threshold, anything lower than 0.2 won't get selected as a star. That might clean things up a little bit. And it does. We have fewer stars. It's still a very busy star field, but let's see how it actually does at selecting what we have here. And if we come down here and turn that off and on, you can see the largest stars weren't selected, but it did a pretty good job at getting the medium stars. The very smallest stars are selected maybe so faintly that we can't really see them in this mask, but the largest stars aren't selected at all. What do we do about that? First, let's get rid of that mask. And we can select larger stars by increasing the scale. I think in this case, increasing the scale to 7 will be enough to pick up these largest stars. And let's say we don't want to pick up all of the small stars. Let's look at what these medium stars are, and that's about 0.53. That's about 0.54. So yeah, let's try raising that to 0.5 and seeing what we get. And we get far fewer stars. So by controlling scale and noise threshold, we can actually do a pretty good job of selecting stars at the level we want. And if we find that we can't select all of the stars that we care about in one mask, we can select stars at one scale and then stars at another scale, and we can use pixel math to add those two masks together, or I'd probably use the max function in pixel math to put them together. These other selections or parameters on the script give you a lot of control over what to do with things, but they're also, it's not clear unless you have a lot of experience, I suppose, what effect they're going to have for you. So it's a lot of trial and error. By comparison, if we turn all of these off, we get a much sparser looking star field than that. They're actually in there. They're just not in there as strongly because we didn't grow the mask according to these things. So one of the things that the light vortex tutorials have taught me is that when you're creating a star mask with the star mask process, it's useful to make a clone of your image and run HDR multiscale transform with 3 layers on your copy. And you can see compared to that image, this became a lot less contrasty. The advantage is that now the stars are all closer together in brightness, and that means the mask that gets created will be closer in brightness than what we had in this version. It's not a huge difference, but it does help. Now, if you want to take a mask like this and figure out or no, excuse me, you want to take a mask like this and make these all the same level, then you can use something like the binarize process. And what you want to do is go in and look for the faintest stars that you care about and see what their level is. And so it looks like anything at about 0.5 or higher, maybe 0.4 or higher, is what we care about. So we can apply binarize here, and that didn't do a great job. We dropped out too many things. Oh, I think I did 0.4 and not 0.04. There we go. So we can take that and do useful things that way. Now, if you find that using these structure growth parameters is a little awkward, one of the things that you can do is apply this if I can drag, apply this mask here. And let's turn it on. And you can see some of our stars, we have the halo and some don't. If we need to make sure that we have the regions beyond the halo for some reason, we can use morphological transformation not on the image but on the mask, and that can be a useful thing to do. I won't go into it here, probably take too much time, but that is a very brief and probably not especially useful look at star mass.